What I can tell you is that the CPQ problem remains to be one of the biggest problems that we have.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the RevAmp Podcast. My name is Mark Lerner. I'm the Director of Growth Marketing here at DealHub. Very excited for today's guest, Jeremy Steinbring from RevOnyx. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for taking the time to chat today, this evening, at least evening here. I know you're on the other coast. We're going to talk about kind of the RevOps quote-to-cash ecosystem and some of the things that are happening there and what that means for the end user. But before we jump into it, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself, about RevOnyx, how you kind of got to where you're at today?
Yeah, great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me. So I for the last 10 to 12 years have been in the tech and SaaS world. I've bounced around all different kinds of roles from marketing and sales and customer success, and I've seen where all the proverbial bodies are buried and where all of the problem childs live. And so naturally, RevOps was a good next step. I kind of fell in love with process, with systems. I became a business systems manager, found myself in consulting. And throughout all of those experiences, again, I fell in love with process, with systems, with handoffs. So the antithesis of siloed work as we know it. And so I started RevOnyx nearly 2 years ago, and we focus on three big things. We do Salesforce and HubSpot CRM setup and optimization. We pair that with tech stack tools like DealHub, CPQ modules, ZoomInfo, all the tools that you typically see in a tech stack. And then we bring it all home with RevOps advisory. So offering all of those services all at once is not something that you see often. And so we try to limit the 50 consultants, 50 internal headcount folks to handle all of it. And it really makes a difference for our customers. So it's a little bit about me. Before doing all of this, I was in audio engineering. No one grows up and says, I want to be in RevOps. So I am a creative at heart before anything else.
That's super interesting. Not many people come through that route, but when you think about it, RevOps is kind of, the tech stack is like your palette, and, you're making a piece of art in some ways by, kind of novel approaches. I like to think of it that way too. So it's not that far-fetched.
No. When you're sitting at you're an audio engineer sitting at the soundboard, like the ins and outs and the way that the signal's going through, like I visualize it the exact same way. There's like no difference.
For sure. I think I'm not even an audio engineer, but I kind of visualize it that way too. You were talking about, process and handoffs and silos. And kind of, I think the quintessential point at which all of those things converge in my world, and I think just kind of generally, is in the quote to cash process, right? You have different people involved, anyone from sales, if it's an upsell, customer success, you have finance, accounting, all sorts of things involved. And it create, if there's silos and systems are not working together, it can be an absolute nightmare, and it often is. So we'll kind of dive into that world. And, one of the things that kind of happened over the last 2 weeks, HubSpot acquired Cashflow, another kind of quote to cash tool. And obviously 10 years ago or something, Salesforce had acquired SteelBrick for a similar purpose. Do you see HubSpot's acquisition there kind of following the same philosophy that Salesforce had taken, or is it kind of going for a different angle?
What I can tell you is that the CPQ problem remains to be one of the biggest problems that we have, especially with a lot of the customers who we help who are more in the startup scale up range. They might have a couple hundred go to market employees, right? But they they're struggling to connect the dots between what is being sold, when things renew for CS, how are we recognizing revenue, how is all of this information feeding financial software, ERP systems? It kind of sits right in between, and if this does not work, it makes everyone's life really, really difficult. And so what it says to me is it indicates that it is a still very real problem that a lot of people struggle to solve, right? And I think that's part of the reason why, they also acquired Clearbit. I think it's been just about a year now, right? Data enrichment, automatically understanding who your customers are and how to find them, and then selling to them and making sure that the right products are being renewed on time. And again, the finance tools are all in sync. It's a massive problem. And frankly, even for the systems that have a solution like CPQ, they can be really painful.
Hmm.
As someone who again works in Salesforce and HubSpot, we kind of see both sides of the coin, and the pros and cons of both systems and how complicated CPQ and get. And a lot of times that's why we recommend tools like DealHub and Cashflow and Subscribe, because it's it's a the problem that needs to be solved, but it maybe doesn't need a full-time employee to manage or implement and cost, $20,000-$30,000 a year. So it signals to me that it's a really big problem and that there are still gaps in what HubSpot offers today that Cashflow solves for.
Yeah. Do when you're approaching this CPQ problem, what are the things that the variables that you're kind of taking into account when guiding one of your customers on how to deal with it? Is there ever a time where it's like, just, use that Google sheet, don't worry about it? Or is it, how do you kind of take in the numbers and decide, this is the direction that they should go?
Yeah. Well, my completely biased opinion is that if you're selling reoccurring products that have start and end dates that renew, auto renew, you need to recognize revenue year over year, you need a CPQ module, you need a subscription engine. Like you do. And I think where we usually find customers is people that working as like Salesforce admin or HubSpot admin, they're using the tools that they have at their disposal to kind of build their own version of it. And every single time it becomes a nightmare. And that's because when when you're a younger company and you're trying to figure these things out, business initiatives change, the product changes, the pricing changes, the people and leadership change. So like you can't keep up with the rate of change and make sure that everything historically is still represented how it was. Like so we I like to call them Frankenstacks, right? Like we sometimes see
Sure.
when we start with customers, like they've built their own CPQ module out of flows and formula fields, and you know CRO comes to us and says, hey, we have a new product we're releasing next year. It doesn't fit into what was built. What do we do? And this is exactly the time where we have the conversation, right? Like we have the sit down and we say, I know that this has worked for you in the past, but this is going to continue to get more expensive of a problem if you don't address it now. And here are the options that I would recommend. And that's when we talk about a tool to supplement a lot of that customization. And frankly, I do like it as an option because it enables people to help themselves. Like ultimately for us, we don't want to be with our customers forever. I mean, we'd love to be, selfishly, that'd be great. But if after a year or two of us working with you, if you haven't grown to where you have your own internal people and you can manage everything yourself, like we're really not doing our job. And so it's not just about like, will it work? Is it the best thing for the future? And it's going to be, the most affordable thing.
Yeah. So, um, in your from the perch that you sit on, do you see that the acquisition there as an indicator of consolidation in the ecosystem? Is it going to stifle innovation and new entrants, or is this just kind of a natural step and not kind of an indicator of some trend?
It's really hard to tell. I'd love to say that I was part of all the conversations and knew exactly what was going on. I'd love to be a fly on that wall.
Yeah.
I do I do think it's telling again that an investment is made in that aspect of the customer journey and life cycle, right? Like I think it's really important to invest in. I also think it's really complicated to build a solid product that does it too. So like anytime you're talking about acquisition, right? There's always the question, especially for a company like HubSpot that has a lot of really great engineering and resources internally to be able to build their own tool. They're probably just looking at it going, listen, this is a painful issue. We have to address it. What's the path of least resistance? Should we acquire a system that we plug and play or start from the ground up? And they probably looked at how complex and complicated it will be to build something from scratch. And they're like, yeah, no, that's probably not the way to go. So that's my take on how I would think about it if I were them. But I'm not sure. It's interesting to see how they're going to roll it out, because also, is this going to be an additional hub? Salesforce, I mean, HubSpot has come out with, I can't tell you how many new products and service offerings over the last 6 months, especially. So is this going to be an add-on? Is this going to be part of their commerce hub? Like, how is this going to roll out? Those are all questions that are still outstanding that we can just think
I'm
about.
pretty sure they're going to fold it into Commerce Hub, is my understanding. But I don't know. I mean, HubSpot had the quotes object already, right? But it was extremely limited. And, we'll see. I know that DealHub has many, 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 many very happy HubSpot customers that are using DealHub with HubSpot, and I don't imagine that'll change. I personally see competition as good for everybody. It's kind of makes innovation happen. And so I'm looking forward to it. And I agree with you. The innovation that's happened on the product in HubSpot land has, especially 6 months leading up to inbound, was pretty wild. I was expecting that to mean like something very, very big dropping at inbound. And I guess it did. They really kind of breezed that AI but I still feel like there's something happening that hasn't come yet. And we can get into that, but I kind of wanted to take it to the other coast, closer to home for you, because we're kind of in this duopoly situation right now in the CRM ecosystem, right? And so in Salesforce land, in Ohana land, just observing, looking at the timeline, right? So 2015, they purchased Steelbrick, or 2015, I don't know if I'm getting that right. About 10 years ago. They renamed it CPQ, but it was still, as far as I understand, a managed package that wasn't like fully native. And then, they've kind of been teasing this revenue lifecycle management thing over and over again. And then it was Revenue Cloud, then it was Revenue Lifecycle Management. Now, again, it's Revenue Cloud, but it's beta and no one really has access to it. And I know that there are some anxieties and concerns. It sounds like there is going to be a mass migration at some point, right? They haven't updated the CPQ product in 3 years or something. But it would be a complete migration, right? You're basically kind of doing a fully new product. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting any of that right, because it's so hard to kind of parse it all. But maybe since you have boots on the ground more than I do, I'd love to hear about, what's going on there.
Well, one thing I can confirm is that it's freaking confusing. Like, because the thing is, if you and I, who are people that are in the ecosystem, we're talking RevOps every day, we're talking CPQ every day. If it's confusing for us, what are people on the ground who actually need to use the tool or trying to solve the problem thinking right now? And listen, this is what we try to do. We try to take really complex stuff and make it really easy for people to understand, but it still takes us to do it. And it's still incredibly complex. And I think what's interesting is the fact that they haven't really updated it recently. Like I get that a lot with like Pardot for the longest time. Like there really weren't any updates being made to it. There are certain products where it's just like, yeah, we have it, it's there, but it's kind of ancillary. Like it's not really our bread and butter. And I think partially it's because companies have created their own software and their own companies in the ecosystem. Like it's almost like, why would I invest the dollars if there are so many other options out there? Like we're not going to have a monopoly on it, right? You call a DealHub, you call a Cashflow, you call whoever, and you can build your own product to do it, which I know is part of the strategy, right? It's how they expand what their tool can do without actually investing their own dollars in it. They just enable others to build off of their platforms. But it is like incredibly complex, both from just understanding what it can do and what am I buying to implementing it, making sure it works well, and making it represent your use case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think they do probably offload some of the innovation to their third-party ecosystem of partners. That's definitely true, but obviously that incurs an additional cost to the end user for that, while they're still selling the CPQ product.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, the people on the ground that I try to observe and try to understand, it seems most of them are asking the same questions that we're asking here. Is like, what's happening? What is going to happen if I have a fully implemented CPQ instance? What happens when RLM/Revenue Cloud becomes the thing? And it seems like there's still not a super amount of clarity. Does that, when you're working with clients, I mean, is that part of the conversation about kind of understanding when talking about choosing a tool, like
Mm-hmm.
understanding roadmap and where it's going and where the customer is going?
It's a complicated thing because obviously our clients and their businesses are changing every day. And then the technology at the same side on the other side is changing just as fast, if not faster. So it's kind of like hitting a bullet train while traveling in the opposite direction, upside down in a truck. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like more of an art than a science. I think what's really important is rather than thinking about the tool, really thinking about where our client's business is going and what they're going to need and trying to solve for now and maybe within the next 12 to 18 months, give or take, right? And anything beyond that is kind of outside of like what's going to be possible. And I said we wouldn't talk about AI, the buzzword, right? Like, but like what's going to be possible, what is
Let's talk
coming, we
about it.
frankly don't know what it's going to look like. And so to make I'm guilt personally, I'm very guilty of this. Right. Like my wife is always yelling at me about this. Like, Jeremy, you're worried about something 6 months from now. You don't know if it's going to happen. You can't control it. So why in the hell are you worried about it? It's kind of the same thing. You gotta live in the moment. And I think when we have the CPQ conversation, if you're selling reoccurring services, you need a subscription engine. That's number one. And then it's just kind of there are three options if you're a Salesforce customer. You either build it yourself in house, using those declarative tools, Apex. You have a third party tool connected to Salesforce, like a DealHub, Cashflow, Subscribe, or you go with Salesforce CPQ. Like that's it. And a lot of it will depend on where the customer is. If it's something where they might only have a couple of sellers, they can get away with doing the DIY model for 2 to 3 years, knowing that I'll eventually have to invest in something later. Sometimes that's right. Other times it's, I don't want to go through the hassle of maintaining that. Let's just go with a tool. Let's just find something that's more affordable. Great. And then there are those that are saying, hey, like money be damned. I just got $50 million from so-and-so for, capital, and let's just go CPQ. Let's go for it. Or my favorite, Salesforce just said I should buy CPQ and I did it, which, sometimes it happens too. You run into those situations all the time, but it's more about the customer than the tool. And like I think it's important not to have the technology lead the process and strategy. It really has got to be the other way around.
For sure. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I went to an event, a think tank event for RevOps folks the other week, and chatted with someone, and he was saying that his company is 2 years into an implementation of a different CPQ, not one of the
Yep.
ones we've talked about,
Yep.
but
Yep.
an older one, and it's still not implemented. Two
Uh-huh.
years in.
Yep. It's brutal.
Yeah, and I know of this particular product is quite expensive. I can't imagine how much they've spent so far. How do you, from the start, kind of ensure that doesn't happen. I think part of it is, like you said, you don't try to fit the process into the tool, right?
Yeah.
You got to do process first. But how do you kind of ensure that, that doesn't happen?
Well, the red flag to me in that scenario is that unless you have 100,000 employees, there's probably other things at play, and I would venture to guess that they probably weren't ready to implement a CPQ when they started.
Yeah.
So I think the first questions to really ask yourself are, okay, we need a subscription engine, we need a CPQ, we want to improve, we want to create the connector that takes sales and CS and finance, like we want to bring all of that together. Great. But you have to figure out, are we in a place where we can? Do we understand what all of our rules are? Rules of engagement around discounting and uplifts year over year, and which team should sell which products, and bundling, and do we have different segmentation we want to capture? Or, are we in the process of implementing NetSuite as our ERP, coming off of QuickBooks? So like a lot of time, like when you have a super long implementation timeline like that, it's like there's no way that a tool would have taken that long if they were completely ready.
Yeah.
So I
I think there was
think,
some turnover between, people that were in charge of it and stuff like
and
that.
then
But
any time that happens too, you have differing opinions about what should happen, So I think in that scenario, it says more about the business being ready and being prepared to implement a tool like that than the tool itself. But as someone who's implemented CPQ and implemented Cashflow and worked with DealHub and done the DIY model myself as a poor little old admin that didn't have any additional budget when I first got started, I've seen it all. Um, you have to be ready and you have to understand what the rules are. And I think a lot of people just don't, they're just uneducated about the rules. I mean, listen, that's okay. Like when we speak with sales leaders and marketing leaders and, founders, like they're meant to do what they do really well. We just have to guide them and kind of educate them on what they need in order to be prepared for a successful implementation. I think that goes with every tool,
mhm.
right? Whether we're talking simple, like just authenticate and it's working, or something like a CPQ implementation. They just have to be ready for it, and it has to solve a goal and a purpose.
Yeah. So I think we can kind of venture into those two letters that are always on everyone's lips for the last 2 years. I had mentioned Inbound, the HubSpot conference, and
Hmm.
that this year, I thought this there was a lot of meaning behind this, but people at HubSpot have told me that's not true. But this year, as opposed to last year, Inbound and I forgot the name of the one that Salesforce does.
Dreamforce.
Dreamforce, yes, the much bigger one. It happened at the exact same time this year on
Uh-huh.
separate coasts, right? Years
Yeah.
before, it was always kind of a week apart. This year, it was just like, nope, we're not even going to pretend anymore. And interestingly, kind of the big launch at both of those events was this kind of holistic AI model that kind of lives in the ecosystem, in the interface, right? So
Yeah.
Agent Force for Salesforce, and then Breeze AI for HubSpot. Um, if you drill down a little bit, the philosophies they're taking there are pretty different. For example, as far as I understand, for Agent Force, it's like $2 per conversation, which seems outlandishly crazy to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with Breeze, it's just kind of part of the product. It's not an extra cost. But clearly, they're both seeing that AI is going to be kind of the main thing. So um, it's increasingly becoming a major factor here, right? So
Yeah.
first, broadly on RevOps, are you seeing AI have like actual use cases that are valuable beyond kind of the parlor tricks that it kind of first had? Or is it still in a hype cycle and we haven't quite found the fit for it?
Yeah. I I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm completely biased. So I'm going to give you my straight up opinion. Whether it pisses people off, it pisses people off. I don't know that the world of business is ready for AI. Frankly, I don't think systems are configured to handle AI. With AI, you still need to feed it good data and good information. And I think a lot of people are doing the whole shiny object syndrome, right? I can't tell you how many people just slap AI on their domain and set up a marketing campaign and get some demos, right? Like that, but that's a symptom of the problem of, ooh, maybe I don't have to hire 5 people. Maybe I just get some AI and give it to the people we have, and we're just as efficient. In theory, that's true. In AI, there are definitely tools out there that are being developed and tools that we already have in our pockets now that make life easier. And we're dreaming big, which is great. It is. It's awesome. But most of the companies we work with aren't really ready for it. Not yet. And I think about a couple things. I think about kind of like the start of the internet, right? Like we're kind of right. We're in the early 90s, right? We're right where it starts to take off. And it's going to continue to get much more embedded in all of the tools, which is why you're seeing just about every SaaS product, including CRMs, include some type of AI offering or start, building AI. But I just don't know that we're ready for it yet. At least the folks that we work with, who again are more on the SMB mid market type clients. I just think that they foundationally they're not ready. And I also think that some of the tools honestly are great. The stuff around transcription, like the tools with like Otter and Fathom and spitting out
Yeah.
sentiment and like taking big groups of data and trying to summarize it for you. That's where the time saving is.
For sure.
But and I'm sure we've all heard like SDR is going away because we just have AI reaching out to customers instead. I mean, we're starting to do that, but does it work? How many
Yeah.
AI messages do you get every day where you respond? You go, ooh, they personalized this email message to me,
Yeah.
so I'm going to go ahead and sign it. It just doesn't work. What works is the human element, which I think you
Yeah.
can't replicate. I wanted to touch on, the Salesforce versus AI
Yeah.
thing. I got my start at Apple way back when.
Hmm.
And it very much reminds me of Microsoft, Apple, Salesforce, HubSpot.
Who's
And
who?
to me, I feel like Salesforce is Microsoft and HubSpot is Apple.
Okay, we're on the same page.
And what I can tell you working in the store all those years, and I mean, once you work at Apple once, like people who work at Apple, if you're watching this, it's like a cult. Like you'll never have a Microsoft product in your house again. It just kind of is what it is. But they won on simplicity, and they went on easy to use, and they went on great customer support and really and service and all of that. And the big push to HubSpot, the reason they're winning is because of those things, not because they have every bell whistle that Salesforce does. And I can tell you from the tech nerd that I am, if I could pick either tool myself right now for my own business, cost, no difference, I'd choose Salesforce every time because it can do more. But I'm also in a place where I can properly implement and maintain it because I understand it. I would say the vast majority of customers in our space, especially, they want simple. Does it work? Can I get the data out of it? I don't want to be tinkering in the CRM, adding custom fields and crazy CPQ. Like I don't want to do that. I just want to do my job, and I want a tool that makes it easy for me to use. And I think that's why HubSpot is winning. AI is going to be a big piece of that. And I also think making it accessible gives your product a lot more bang for its buck, right? So like if you're including AI tools for free, well, you're going to get better product feedback, you'll get better usage, you'll see more value out of using that product. And so I do kind of see similarities now that they're playing tug of war, especially over the last year. And I'll tell you, we're in a unique position because we're certified partners in both. So a lot of our customers are moving from one to the other, or we're helping them with a merger and acquisition where there's two tech stacks. One has HubSpot, one has Salesforce, and we're moving everything into one, very complex work. More people are telling me I want to get away from Salesforce and move into HubSpot than the other way around, which
Is that a newer
traditionally
recent development?
traditionally it was always the other way around. You could start with HubSpot, but inevitably you'd need to move to Salesforce. So it was just a matter of time. And now I think the people that have been on Salesforce for a while are sick and tired of paying for full-time employees just to manage it and add fields. And I think it also ties into the CPQ conversation, right? Because the more complexity you add, the harder it is to use, the harder it is to maintain, the more that people are going to be averse to use it.
Yeah.
And so my thinking is that HubSpot and tools like HubSpot that are leveraging AI that make it easy for the customer to use it are going to win as technology gets more complicated. That's just
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there
Yeah.
because I spend a lot of time thinking about these things too. When I first came across ChatGPT, when pretty much everyone did, was like November of 22 or 23, whenever it was, I was pretty, I kind of assumed I would be unimpressed, right? I had tried Jasper and didn't really understand it. I tried
Mhm.
other things and was like, nah, whatever. And then I kind of had this aha moment that I think a lot of people have had. And since then, it's for me personally, it's done amazing things, but it's always been when there was a human in the loop, setting it on its own as much as I try. And I always do. I always have a window open right here with my latest test of figuring
Mhm.
out how I can automate everything. Um, but I haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it is a great democratizer in ways. So, for example, someone like me who wasn't technical very much can now no longer need to reach out to a dev, someone in my company, if I need to write a SQL query or if I need to write Python code or anything. Like I can do all of that now, and that is
Yep.
a huge unblocker for so many things. Do you see that happening in the RevOps world? Because I'm often surprised to find that it hasn't, and that like maybe my experience is somewhat unique. Um, but do you see that happening?
A little bit. I do think that RevOps in general is kind of a new philosophy. Whereas, typically you would have your operations team in each major department and they'd kind of be operating separately. This idea that there is one now agnostic group, regardless of the function, working to put together the process and systems. Like it's just different. It's new. It's a new way of thinking. And I think the tools have enabled, including AI, have enabled RevOps to become a household name. I think that's why so many people are interested in what we do. Um, I see some of it. I definitely think like things like, hey, I've written a line of code. Tell me where there are issues. Perfect. Great time savers. You still need to be the one to give it the information to tell it what to do. But that's not how it's going to be forever. In fact, I do feel like one of the best things about AI and RevOps and tech stacks and everything we've talked about is companies that would have never survived 5 years ago because of runway and lack of funding, because they need headcount, they need bodies, human capital to help build their tool. They're not going to have that overhead anymore. And so I think we're going to see companies make a lot more money a lot faster with a lot less, which is fantastic news for entrepreneurs, people like me. Like we've always considered building a product and to supplement our work in consulting. And like that's always something I've been interested in doing as someone who's been in SaaS and tech for a long time. And I'm not going to need to go and get a 4-year degree in computer science and learn how to dev. I'm just going to have ChatGPT and I'm going to give it very specific information or whatever in whatever tool it is. It's already starting to come out this way. And I even think who's the CEO of Nvidia? I can't remember his name.
Jensen Huang, something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Jensen.
yeah. So I was listening to an interview that he gave, and it might have been like a speech. I don't know. It's on social, and he was saying, um, we told our kids, if you wanted to make good money,
Yeah.
be a doctor, be a lawyer, go become learn how to code, build. And he said that's the last thing that he would tell his kids to do because all of the tools that we're building and the tools that will become available, you won't need to know how to code. It'll be a waste. Better yet, understand people, understand relationships, understand how business works, that's way more important than learning the, headphones on, just coding all day. And again, we're not there yet. We're talking ideal state, but that's the place we're going. And if
Yeah.
you think about all the tech stack tools that you work today that are complex, they're probably going to have AI modules in them where you're like, hey, anytime this happens, I want an email sent to me, boom, and it's done. And it's done it for you. You don't need to create a flow and put an element in to send an email. Like all that's being done. I have no doubt that's where we're headed.
I mean, part of me, when I take it to its kind of more extreme end, are we even going to be interacting with these interfaces, or is it just going to be a chat window that we do everything in, that it surfaces what we need? Like, to me, it seems like that's kind of the natural place we're going to. Like, why do I need to open a window for Salesforce and then another window here? Like, why doesn't my agent just pop up whatever I need to see at a given moment?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there will definitely be, if not, it's gotten rid of completely. Like that will be a big part of it. You'll almost have, I almost think about it like you'll have your own executive assistant, and it'll probably be cross platform too.
Yep.
Like I could also see, you having an AI assistant that understands that you download, that sits with you on meetings, learns how you talk, learns about your strategies, your experience, how you present things. Think about it. If you had someone sitting by you side by side 24/7 watching what you did for work in all of your systems, and then you're basically duplicating yourself. You could call on all of your experience without actually having to do anything at all. Like we're not there yet, but that's where we're going. And it's
I mean,
kind of
it's the thing
scary
I
if you
try
think
to
about.
figure out every day when I'm like hacking on the side.
It's scary. It's scary because, and again, this is a different topic for a different day, but I think about entry level positions,
Yeah.
like those are gone. So if you're just out of college, like, and again, I know there will be jobs to do, right? I'm not saying no one's going to have nothing to do, but again, like all of the interviews and things that I've seen with tech leaders from Elon to like all the people, they are like, they want to implement like wage security for people. Like everyone just gets a wage because they're not going to have work to do. It's just going to be machines and compute. And again, I'm going to keep saying this over again. This is not happening tomorrow,
Right.
but in our lifetime, potentially.
Yeah.
And it's going to get there faster than we think, because with AI, what's very different is it learns from itself,
Yeah.
which is the first time that that's happened.
Right. I mean, we've hit the kind of, exponential point. If you look at kind of the usage of AI, um, and then like the usage of electricity to power AI and like all these other things, like we've clearly hit an inflection point. And I don't know if people have fully appreciated, because I don't think it's really made its way all the way down, right? Like people, my parents, my friends, like they're just now kind of like, maybe I use ChatGPT to write an email. Like that was
Right.
something that like I did like 2 years ago, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like it hasn't fully seeped down yet, but it will. So kind of stepping out of the AI conversation a little bit. And maybe maybe this can be kind of the last part of the conversation. Um, if we look at Salesforce and their Agentforce product, that is a usage-based pricing product, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of seems to me that they're, especially if everybody is going to be incorporating certain AI features into their product, the kind of just the way tokens work, we're likely going into a world where everyone's going to have to kind of handle usage-based pricing in their products at some point.
Yep. Yep.
Do you see like, do you put that into your CPQ problem when you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the CPQ problem, and is it part of the roadmap when you discuss it?
Well, similar to AI, I think the usage-based model for most SaaS is coming. And
Yeah.
it's very similar to, and again, speaking to consultants out there like me, like there's a lot of different ways that you can do consulting. You can do a retainer, you can do hourly, you can do a value-based model. And essentially it's value-based for tech is how I just think about it, just from the space that I'm in all the time and what I'm thinking about every day with consulting and client engagements and that kind of thing. But it's value, right? Like if you have 10 people with licenses but no one uses it, well then you're paying for nothing essentially. But if you have unlimited users and you can have your entire team in to use when you need it, every transaction, every conversation, every whatever that dollar value is the value. Do you think it's worth it? Right? So like I actually think it's more fair. And what I'm seeing is more customers being interested in usage based for that very reason. If I'm not using the product, why do I, in order to just get access to it for the couple people on my team that need it, why am I paying licenses for, for admin? And I see this a lot too. Like when we work with customers, there are some tools where we have free admin seats that we can use, but like, I know this is not a problem most people care about, but like they have to buy a license for us just to get in the tool, plus the people we have on the team if we're not sharing license counts, so like, but I do think that we're moving in this direction, and I actually think it's more fair. If you want to be honest with you, I would think it's more fair. And I would be more interested in a usage value based model than a just flat license count per head.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it's gonna hurt. Some companies it's really gonna hurt, and others it's really gonna help financially.
Who's it gonna, on the user side or on the service provider?
Well, I think either, depending on your situation, right? Because if you're getting a lot of value out of having a license, and the value of that cost per license per month, you're getting a ton of value out of it, but it does go to usage and it flips, there's going to be a wake up call for people.
Yeah.
For sure. It's either going to help you or hurt you depending on, but it's going to do one of the either. It's going to be one of them. So, it could be more painful. You could start hearing more about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the more I think about it, I think the per seat model was probably due to a technological bottleneck rather than it was a bug rather than a feature. Mm-hmm. And maybe people are going to start, figuring it out more. My last question, because I know that you probably have stuff to do. Based on what you just want to talk all day. Based on what we were talking about and AI and how it's going to allow smaller companies to do more with less, how far are we from the one person unicorn?
Man, probably not as far as we think.
Yeah.
At the rate that things are progressing, I know entrepreneurs that are creating their own businesses and using tools to supplement their work. And I mean, we're talking small scale. We're not talking unicorn. We're talking newsletters, webinars, one-off businesses with consulting courses, like things that, one person could handle, but they don't need a support rep. They don't need somebody on the phones. They don't need an engineer. They're doing it themselves. They don't need customer success and sales. Like they're using technology for all of that. But we're probably not as far away as we think. Like we're probably talking in the next 5 years, we're probably talking about, someone hitting, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars by themselves. Like I would not be shocked if that were the case.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where it feels like we're heading. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think there's going to be a time in the near term, next few years where it's going to happen. There's going to be one, and then there'll be two.
Yeah.
But
I will say real quick, I will say, as someone who's started my own company by myself without a co-founder, it's friggin' hard. Yeah. Whether you're smart and have the drive, and even if you lock yourself in a room 24/7, even if you had all the tools, you have to know how to bring a product to market. You have to know how to sell it. You have to be able to maintain it. You have to be the visionary for the product. You have to be able to support it. You got to do finances, contract. Like, it's building a company is not a one-person job. And so again, right now, infancy stages of AI, there's no way that it could replace all of that experience and knowledge and hands-on keyboards that someone would need to grow a successful business. That's just like, when it happens, it's going to be really cool, a cool use case to look at. And it's probably for a product we don't yet understand or has not been invented yet. It's going to be a new category, something we do not know. I think in today's business world, it's not possible.
Yeah, maybe somebody's thinking it up right now, or maybe
I'm sure
maybe one of us will tonight when we can't sleep.
I doubt it, but maybe.
All right, Jeremy, I really appreciate your time. Before we go, why don't you tell the folks at home where they can maybe learn more about you and what you're doing, or RevOnyx and
of course. I love problems, RevOps problems specifically. So if you have one, I want to hear about them. Ironically, I learn a lot from people asking me hard questions. And so I love brainstorming. So I'm pretty active in the community, RevOps Co-op, RevGenius on LinkedIn. Please come find me. If you're interested in working with our team, you can go to RevOnyx.io and learn all about us. But yeah, Mark, it was great. Thanks for inviting me to chat. And